between the last episode and this one, I think I've gained at least 7 kilos. That's right. I have gone down to the path of indulging myself with instant gratification through food. Yep. This is it. This is the last episode of the State of the Creators podcast. No more guests, no more episodes, except this one. Season 1 is over. The reason why I wanted to do this one last episode is because I wanted to encapture everything I had in terms of my thoughts, why I chose certain guests, why I decided to do a podcast. So first things first, I want to talk about the guests, right? I've picked the things that I personally am comfortable with, and just decided to have a go and chat with these people and find out their process. Because, you know, one thing in Bangladesh and beyond, not so much in beyond these days, but especially in Bangladesh, nobody talks about the process. Everybody sees the end results. It's all usually the numbers, it's likes and millions of views and things like that. But the amount of process that goes behind even a simple caption on an Instagram post, or you know, a music video or a song or a photo, it's the depth of it is ridiculous. I always felt that, but it was only after speaking to other creatives did I feel that, oh, there's a connection, you know, like we all go through the same stuff. So I think that's what pushed me to do this podcast, is to communicate that with the rest of the world, and the followers of these creators, because there is not a single platform who does the deep dive into the process of creation, at least in Bangladesh, not that I know of. Elsewhere it's happening. You know, like there are many podcasts and TV shows, even on Netflix there are lots of amazing documentaries which go into that detail. So I just wanted to replicate that through the podcast. Now, upon choosing the guests, right? So because, like I said, I am comfortable in discussing certain areas of creativity. So obviously I don't have a grasp on all of it. For example, acting, I actually wouldn't. I don't think I'd be able to still interview an actor, but it would be very general questions because I don't act myself, so I can't empathize to the degree of an actor or an actress. Same with poetry. I'm not a big poetry fan. I don't write poems, so for me, again, that like those are the things I didn't really touch on. Maybe in the future. Whereas like music, I have been involved with music for a good number of years. I've been involved with photography and cinematography and just general social media content and marketing and things like that. And that's why I chose people from these areas, because I felt that I could have that conversation in depth, and not just on the surface level. So that was the reason why I chose certain guests. I'll start with the questions. So the first question comes from Rashik. This is double EQ Rashik. He also asked a question in one of my previous Q&A episodes. Again, he is relentless creator, and I say relentless because he just keeps making stuff, man. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's a photo, if it's you know, a quick video, a soundbite. Yeah, it's just been relentless. So,
hey Thassss bhai, this is Rashik. I hope you're doing good. The question that I have for you is, we all know you balance different ventures, different sides of your creative mind. So has it ever happened that you mixed up different projects from the different avenues you have? Any funny incident? I would love to know. And you talked about a hate song, so I thought, why not create a gratitude song for State of the Creators? So this is me trying something silly, but hope you enjoy it, and good luck with season 2. I hope there's a season 2.
oh man.
State of the Creators, made for the creative. Lots of amazing guests, you know all the rest. Listen to all the episodes, amazing questions from the hosts. Great job, bro. Give it up, give it up, give it up.
That is insane, Rashik. It's even more insane because he only learned to play the ukulele over the last few. Dude, that's insane, Rashik. Fills me fills me up with joy. and just happiness. Thanks, man. Thanks for the song. Means a lot. Any incidents about mixing up my creative projects? No funny incidents that comes to mind. One thing I did do is post a personal picture on Plantic once. Just I was in so much of a rush that I just quickly posted something and almost immediately realized that it's a personal picture. It was not a nude, so let's just get that out of the way. It was simply a selfie with a friend. And I almost immediately took it down. Nobody saw it. Nobody. Luckily, it was an off-peak time. So that's the only thing I can think of close to a funny incident. Chaudhary19, Mainul. He is also part of Bongo. We've worked in a couple of projects together as well. Lil Late's music video. He asks, best way to grow your social media pages and use it for generating income. Ooh. Best way. So there's two parts of it. So first is growing that audience and then using that audience to generate income, right? Growing an audience, honestly, you don't need millions of followers. You just don't. There's this theory called 1,000 True Fans, by Kevin Kelly, if I'm not mistaken. It's an essay he wrote a couple of decades back. It's essentially the idea that you need only 1,000 people who are truly dedicated in your craft. And this is not just a like on Facebook. This is someone who would travel across states to listen to your music live. This is someone who would go out of their way and buy your latest merch drop. And if you can secure these 1,000 people, and this is something, even without this theory, a couple of my guests also mentioned it, and I think Ruman mentioned it as well in one of his things, in the episode. If you can get to that point, then anything that you do becomes, like the monetary and generating income just comes as a thing. But there's mainly four main ways that I can see of generating income. Number one is, like forget about the 1,000 True Fans, but if you're sitting on just a fan base, four ways. Number one, you get advertisers. Pretty straightforward. Branded content, sponsors, advertisers, whatever you call it. They pay you a certain money, and you create content that goes to your pages. The other is through direct to consumer stuff. So essentially, you sell merchandise or you sell your product or services directly to your audience. If you're a YouTuber, you could, like, say, sell merch or some product that you would have created. Emma Chamberlain, for example, has her own coffee beans, her own coffee bag, so that's pretty cool. What else? Generating income through the platform. So YouTube, for example, pays you a certain amount, which is ad revenue through YouTube's monetization program. But you need a lot of people to start generating a regular income. I would suggest just three, really, because direct to consumer includes merch and things like that. That's how I would categorize it anyway. Cool. The next question is from Naeem Islam. He used to be part of the Plantic crew, so shout out to Naeem for his years of service. He asks, when you're creating content, how do you usually decide your next topic? So for different things, I do it differently. So for example, for Plantic, it's usually quite ad hoc at this stage, but we do have like a month's worth of content, at least, in progress. With my podcast, for example, I knew exactly the 10 topics I wanted to do, the guests I wanted to have, even prior to shooting. So I usually sit down and think of the audience, like what would they want? What is it that I'm trying to communicate? And what would give me joy, really? Like whatever falls in that Venn diagram's intersection is how I try and come up with my content topic. So yeah, that's usually the quick, easy answer. The next question is a voice question, so we'll go into it.
Hey, Nahi and Nasir here. I want to ask you if you ever see yourself making content for TikTok.
Nahian, thanks man for the question. Nahian again is an amazing creator. He is the founder or co-founder of Gurughash, a fantastic apparel brand. Their content marketing is top drawer, like probably one of the best in Bangladesh. He's got like two other brothers who are also just as amazing in content marketing. Like anything that you see, usually targeting the youth in terms of food and different media entities, they probably have had a role in that. So yeah, Nayan, thanks for the question. There's actually another question that's similar to this one from my good friend Fahad Zaman. Nice shot. Fahad Zaman is again an amazing creator. He's a producer of music. He's done some amazing videos and documentaries and visuals. He's also one of those who's always in the back end, never just comes forward. He's been part of Glitch, an amazing agency based out of Dhaka. Shout out to Junaid and Fardeen from Glitch as well. So he asks me about TikTok as well. Okay. So do I see myself doing anything on TikTok? Yes and no. The thing is, TikTok's an amazing platform. Like, don't get me wrong, I think there's a lot of stupid prejudice around TikTok or any new platform. Whether it's MySpace, people having a go at Facebook, and Facebook having a go at Instagram. Anything new that comes out is almost immediately discarded, whether it's music, platforms, anything like that. So TikTok is a great platform, from experience. I think I've got one video in there. I think you need a certain mentality to be able to push out content on TikTok. If I ever do it, it's just gonna be out of hobby, just some stupid jokes that I can think of. That's the only thing with TikTok. Limitation with TikTok usually is it's mostly entertainment, and very quick entertainment, which I'm not a big fan of. It's good for for relaxing and stuff, but I don't want to dedicate my life creating things that are very quickly consumed and forgotten about. To play the long game, I think you need to involve everything. So just dedicated to TikTok, probably no. Every now and then content, maybe yeah. But I think it's a great tool, great marketing tool for sure. Like, you need to think of TikTok as part of your marketing strategy if you haven't already. So Piaja Roche asks, how does one market boring stuff like software? So I remember in one of my interviews for a marketing job 4 or 5 years back, they asked a similar question. Like, this is a very boring thing. It was basically an agriculture. It was an app for farmers and agronomists, right? So it was very agriculture based, not very exciting per se. And my answer was that if your marketing is good enough, you can get people to pay to watch paint dry. And he was so impressed with that answer. I think it's how you market people to then watch paint dry, essentially, or sell boring stuff, is that you have to understand again who you're selling to, right? Like, really get into that person. If it's for another business, B2B, at the end of the day, even if it's B2B, there's a person making that decision, right? And you have to think, what is it that they need for their business? For software, like, there's some really cool software companies. If it's not a direct-to-consumer, if it's a direct-to-consumer model, then it's great. Like, it's easier. But if it's a business-to-business model, then you have to think on a deeper level of what does that person base off his decision for his business. I would say really, really study your audience. Like, really, really study who's making the decision to buy that software. What is it that they like? What is it that they see? What is it that, where do they spend their most of their time? And start appearing there. Like, be in the top of mind all the time. And then really, think of other business to business models. Like, where can you get referrals? Where can you get a bigger client? Where are the other markets that they're involved in? And try to leverage those markets and then reach to your targeted decision maker at the end of the day. I don't think there's one right answer. It depends on the product as well, the type of software as well. But yeah, I think that hopefully gives a little bit of context as to what you can do. Masudul22 asks, how did you choose the guests? I kind of answered that at the start of the podcast. So thanks for the question, Masudul. So I don't think I'll get into that answer, but yeah, generally, just the start of the podcast, you should be able to hear that. The next is a voice question as well.
I'm Ariba, and I have 2 questions to ask you. What made you want to start podcasts? And secondly, could you suggest some video editing apps for beginners?
Thanks, Ariba. Ariba sounds like the Mexican cartoon. I forgot. I'm not gonna try and mimic that. I'll just maybe play a clip over. Thanks, Ariba, for the question. She's currently in Iran. Based off of her last Instagram story, she mentioned that the best thing about Iran is, are the beaches. I never expected an answer. Thanks for the question, Ariba. So, what made me start the podcast? I think there's actually another question that's kind of similar. It's a written question as well. I think it's Adib41. What inspired you to start the podcast? I think for me, it was more, I've always loved listening to podcasts. I did podcasts ages ago for Plantic, and that helped me be in touch with the medium. And as I mentioned earlier, it's such an intimate way to connect to your audience. I don't think there's no other intimate medium where you can literally be in a person's head. I know a lot of you are watching it on video, but I've got a good amount of audio listeners as well, who only probably listens to the audio, and that's such a cool thing to do. Like be in their headspace, communicate them, directly. It's always going to be a small number compared to video or other mediums, but that small number will be your strongest number. And if you can get that number to 1,000, I think you've built the big, you've got the best case scenario, really. So that kind of was the reason why, I've started a podcast. Is, was a big fan. Why this specific podcast? Because, as I mentioned, I saw there was a gap between creators and their audience and the process behind creating stuff, and I just wanted to tell the story for each of these creatives. So for beginner video editing application, it just depends what you want to use the videos for. If it's just for social media purposes, and not to say YouTube and things like that, if it's just short stuff, InShot is actually a very good mobile application. Actually, I'll link you to a YouTuber called Salman Sadi. He's a photographer, cinematographer, and he talks about this stuff. Like, he's probably the Peter McKinnon of Bangladesh, really. I don't usually like terming stuff of Bangladesh, but, he's Salman Sadi. He's really good. I'll link his channel as well. He goes in depth about, what's a good editing app that you can use, on the go, like your mobile. But generally, I use Premiere Pro. It's a bit more advanced, but it's worth it. Just if you take some time learning it'll help a lot. But if it's just for simple social media videos, InShot is the mobile app to use. Adib also asked another question. Also, do you agree that Bangladesh is currently going through a content revolution? Yes, 100%. I think some of the content that I've seen is really good, but it's in like very small niche pockets. But people are trying newer things. There's newer taste. There's like new, it's like a new kind of, there's a new fresh feel to everything. And that's why it's so exciting. And that's why I love what I'm doing, because that's why I love what I've been doing, because it's targeting that new wave of creative stuff coming in. So thanks for the question, Adib. Appreciate it, man. Sadman07, how did you grow so much to the point you met United players? Thanks, Sadman, for the question. So it's got a lot to do with Plantic, a bit to do with luck, and also just, perseverance, really. With Plantic, because it's gone to a certain level now, I can leverage it to get into press conferences or cover games and have certain connections within the industry. There's a few people I know who helped me get passes to meet United players and do some of the cool stuff that I've done. There was this thing with Marriott Hotel as well, which I became a part of. But yeah, man, it's literally through leveraging my network through people that I know, really. So I would say literally building your network is the best thing you can do to reach certain pockets of things, whether it's United players, in your creative space, musicians. You just need to know how to speak to people and get out to them. I know it's tough as an introvert, but then Iftikhar Rafsan shows you how to do that stuff while being an introvert. So plug to my other episode. Next question is from Sadman Rami Khan. What do you think about the future of podcasting in Bangladesh? Love your podcast. Can't wait for season 2. These podcasts help me start creating content again. Thanks for the great stuff. Oh, dude, thank you so much. Really appreciate the last line. Like, honestly, that's literally the thing that I chase. Anything that helps inspire others to create. Big, highest of the high, really. Travis Scott has nothing on it. Okay, so what do you think is the future of podcasting in Bangladesh? Here's the thing. Bangladesh is such an interesting case study, right? In any given circumstances, podcasts should already be popular. Two things, right? Number one, the audio format through radio shows is already so popular, right? It has to be one of the most popular in the world, where people listen to so much radio content, radio shows and things like that. The only difference between a radio show and a podcast is that one is on demand and the other isn't, and generally there's a lot less vetting and control and things like that with your own podcasts. Second of all, the premise to consume audio in Bangladesh is so much higher than video, because of the bandwidth, because if you're on the streets, traffic jams and stuff like that, it should essentially be the next medium of content that people should be creating. But I don't think people understand the concept of podcasting yet, because God help me, how many times I've seen through the quarantine period people calling a video Zoom interview a podcast. It's not a podcast. Like, for the love of God, it's not a podcast. It's a video interview recording of your Zoom call. Rant over. A podcast is an audio first thing. It can have a video component like this. If you choose to watch the video, that's up to you, but it has to be primarily an audio on demand streaming or downloading, with streaming or downloading capability. Really, that's it. That's the definition. So in theory, we should be getting more podcasts. I know Imagine Radio and a few others are trying to do podcasts. I think there's a boom happening. Over the next year, we should be seeing more and more podcasts. I've already been seeing so many popping up. Since I've started doing it, I've seen at least 4 or 5 random ones just popping here and there. So good stuff, man. Couldn't be more excited. Let's just go.
Hi Thassss, my question to you is, what influenced you to make podcasts? I've seen many Bangladeshi YouTubers make them, but none of them are as detailed and creative as yours. And what are your workflow? I mean, how do you just point out and research about the people and the questions?
So that was Shahir Rafid. He is part of the Planted crew as well. Thanks Rafid for the question. The first part of the question is, I think I've answered it a few times. Why do I podcast and things like that? The second part of the question is actually quite interesting, because he talks about how do I get into the deep dive and research the guests. I love this question because I actually take pride in how much research I do on the guests. I think interviewing people is an art, right? Even though I don't mean my podcasts with guests to be an interview, it's more of a discussion, but having even that conversation is an art form when you're the one leading the way. With pretty much all the interviews that I've seen in Bangladesh, at least in the mainstream side of things, it's so boring. It's so same format, even over the quarantine. Top question. First thing people ask, so how has you quarantine kemon jacche bhai apnar bashaye thakte bored lagche na? It's the same bloody shit over and over again, and it's tiring because nobody gives a shit about your quarantine routine. You know, like that's not why they're here for. With my formatting, I've tried to create a structure where, first of all, I can hook people into the thing straight away, which is why you get a snippet at first. And then, you know, and it has to be relevant to the topic. It's not just a random ha funny moment. It has to be relevant to what they're about, what represents. Like, that snippet should represent the guest and their mentality. And that should be enough of a hook for whoever wants to continue. And therefore, I don't have any, like, hey, how was your day? What are you doing? Like, that's temporary. Nobody wants to know that shit, right? How was your day is a short-lived answer that will only exist for that specific moment in time. It has no relevance 500 years from now. But what will forever be relevant is their process of creating, their mentality, what were their relationships with their parents and things like that. So I try to put myself into the shoes of the audience as to what I would have wanted to listen to as an audience. And second of all, I try to understand the perspective of the guest or the person I'm speaking to, because I want them to enjoy as well. One of the greatest feeling that I get is when the guest says, "That's a great question." Like that just ticks mark, you know, like big tick mark for me whenever someone, you know, says, you know, "That's a great question," or "Nobody's asked me that before," or that's the biggest high as well. Trust me. The research, you know, I spend time and hours and just to know what they like. I study their work. You know, like one person who really inspires me is Nardwar. He's very popular in the hip hop community. There's this little clip where he goes and asks these questions to these hip hop artists, and they just freak out because the amount of research / stalking that he has done is insane, and there's no way he would have gotten the information. You know, like nobody else would have. But he does, and he freaks out his guests through these questions because that's the amount of depth and that feeling, because it's not just about your audience, it's also about the person you're talking to, who you want to make, you know, who you want to also give an experience. So that's, I guess, the core of what I do. Great question, man. As you can tell, I was keeping that in to answer. So thanks, man. Ragib Fatih Muazzam / Robindranath. This guy, man, he is such a brilliant. He didn't have a question. Actually, I misread. I demand to be on the show as an unsuccessful businessman and a failed creative. If he calls him a failed creative, then it's game over for all of us, because he's so good with photography, with his small films. I've added a few of his short films over the last few months in my newsletter. Sign up to my newsletter if you haven't already. Thassss.com, all that jazz. But his work has been just fantastic. So check him out. I don't know why he said that, but yeah, imposter syndrome. There's that. Faraz asks, Faraz Stein, I think is his Instagram handle. Is it possible to survive in the podcast industry? If you aren't well known from before? Good question. Do you believe there would be a podcast industry in Bangladesh soon? So second part of the question I kind of answered already. So is it possible to survive in the podcast industry if you aren't well known from before? Yes and no. Technically, you know, I had a little bit of an audience from different segments, but nobody knows me per se. It's only through podcasts and YouTube some of you are beginning to know me. So it's, if you want to make millions of dollars to podcast, don't. Like, that's not what this is for. This is for building, you know, having a community and building a community. And the more niche you get, you'll get stronger audience, but you won't get big numbers. And you know, if you want to build a career out of podcast, it's a totally different ball game. You'd have to think of sponsors. You'd have to think of different topics, research, SEO, get into a certain niche, it's pretty interesting. So it's pretty tough. It's not gonna be easy. So to be fair, I don't think you can survive in the industry if you are looking to make a full-time income out of it. Straight away, you need to put in 6, 12, 24 months of effort. So in a way, you have to build that audience, and then either through the podcast or through something else, then move into podcasts. So good question for us. Really like that question. Next question is Saqib bin Rashid. I'm an aspiring writer, and I'd like any sort of tips and tricks to hack into this writing game. Any kind of advice is welcome, as getting an insight from a completely different person really helps. Best of wish for Atlantic, getting there better feedback. Thanks, Saqib. Great question. With writing, right, I'm not a writer per se. I do copywriting for, for social media content. I write articles and things like that for the website, but it's not really writing to the point of, like a proper novel writer or grade A writers or professional writers. So I would say the only bit of advice that I can give you in terms of practicing that art form is write every day. No matter what, one page, promise to yourself, write something. Either it's about journal, it's about something you want to talk about, maybe it's a fictional series. Even if it's, like half a page, write something every day. Like, make it as if you're eating food. What that does, I think, like this is something I've heard other writers say as well. Like, creative block is an easy excuse. I use that excuse all the time. But creative block doesn't mean that you can't produce anything. Creative block means you can produce something and it's going to be shit. And the idea is it's worth producing that shit over not producing at all. You don't have to distribute that, or share that shit content, but you need to at least write that stuff every day and keep revisiting as to why it was shit down the line. That's literally the only way you can improve. So that's literally my only piece of advice as a non-writer. This applies to everything, to be fair, everything. Good question, Saqib. I hope that helped. Saleh a hawk, planting guy as well, lives in Canada. Let's hear his question.
It's Asiba. It's Saleh. So what's one thing you would say is fundamentally important that you've learned living abroad for so many years?
Living abroad.
That's all.
Okay, so not a creative or podcast related question. Any advice for living abroad, bro? Just experiment the hell out of the place. You'll regret it later for not, experiencing a different country, different culture. I learned that later down the line. Obviously, money is an issue as a student. If you're traveling, is not that easy, but I would make that a higher priority than buying a new pair of shoes or something else, because you can always buy a new pair of shoes, but you won't have that energy or that mentality or that freedom mindset that you would have now living abroad. It's you don't want to realize that too late. So yeah, and I know Canada's only got a few months of sunshine over the year, so make the best use of it whenever you can. That's my only tip. The other tip I would say is start networking. Like, really, for your career, just start networking. Learn, get to know more people. Just immediately, whatever career goals you have, know more people within that industry. Would have helped me like 10 times more if I was more active in that domain. So yeah, that's my advice, man. I hope you're keeping well. The Beardless Lad asks a question, voice message. Let's go.
Hello, Thassss Bhaiya, fellow podcaster here.
Hey.
I'm the Beardless Lad, and I wanted to ask you, what strategy would you suggest for paid advertising for growing an audience? Thank you.
Hey, the Beardless Lad. Awesome to see another fellow podcaster. It's really good to see. Like, as I mentioned, it's a growing market. So thanks for listening in. Paid advertisement, man, that's the first question, because generally people don't look into paid advertisement as much. I'm not a big fan of paid advertisement for, just pushing out content unless you've built a sizable audience. I would say build an audience, like focus on what type of audience you want first, and then you can start thinking of expanding on paid marketing. If you have zero and then you just want to put in money, because with paid marketing, it's a process. Like, just to see the results, you need to probably do paid ads for like 2 or 3 months for the algorithm to learn what kind of audience you're after. And if you don't have that kind of capital, it's difficult, because it's gotten to such a sophisticated level now. I don't think anybody can do paid marketing. You need to really study and know the game. So I would say, actually, it's probably an unpopular opinion, but I would say don't get into paid marketing if you don't have an audience base already. I don't have many listeners compared to big podcasters, but I've grown into a sizable, like, small audience, maybe like 20, 30 people who would always listen to my episodes from the stats that I can see. That's all organic. And most of the people aren't my friends or people who I knew already. So I think it's just leveraging that to build slowly. It's a long game. And then you can start, doing some ads on this once you've understood what audience you have. So, but if you really want to get into paid marketing, maybe just look into doing some experiments, like short bursts of experiments, and see the results. Like, make sure you're tracking your ads, your audience, you're looking at your ads, studying them, understanding them, and then going from there. Yeah, that would be my advice. Fardeen Arafat asks, how do you come up with different unique ideas to create any creative or insightful content? Does researching help to shape those ideas, or is it about trial and error until you make something meaningful or the way you want it? That's a really good question. Any sort of advice you'd give to someone who likes the idea of podcast and wants to do something out of it? Watched a few episodes you made, very insightful. The first question is actually very, very good. How do I come up with unique ideas? Does researching help? 100%. So generally, with my creative stuff, it really depends on what platform or like what entity I'm working with. Right now I'm trying to focus on my own YouTube stuff because I've got stuff that I want to get off my chest. But for Plantic, it's a totally different ballgame. I'll have to study, what's coming up. Is there like a new event, Champions League final or something like that? What are the audiences looking at these days? What are the trends? So that's more direct research there. But if it's something new, like a video essay, I'll have to research like previous video essays that I've done in the past, or essays that already exist, and how do they communicate and things like that. So, for example, the FIFA Plantic video that I did about music and FIFA, how FIFA influences music of the world, FIFA the video game. What I did was I looked at other video essays like Nerdwriter and like Captain Christian. Great video essays, and I learned what they did, how they spoke, what the graphics were, the visuals were. Really studied the intricacies, but the story is the main thing. So I would focus on what the story is that you want to tell, and then build the technicalities around it. Otherwise, you're not going to hit the mark. I think most of my successful work is successful because it targeted the story for a certain audience, and not because I wanted to do a slow-mo video just for the sake of a slow-mo video, which you see a lot these days. Essentially I'd call them glorified TikToks. So it's really making sure that you have a story to tell and connect it. You probably won't get big numbers out of it, but again, it's the depth of the connection you'd have with the certain people you do connect with, and over the long term it'll slowly build. Trial and error for sure, but also studying what you've already done. You really have to push it out there. That's it. Good question, Fardeen.
Hey Thassss,
This is my question for your podcast. The question is, how do you balance the time between building an audience and contemplating and working on the content that you're creating? Do you think there is, because all kind of creativity is varied, right? There's one that takes more time, the other one doesn't take as much. So in the digital age, it seems like the artists or the creators have to take a lot more time out of their work time or contemplating time to market themselves. So how does one creator manage this balance? Yeah, that's it. Cheers.
Great question. That was Shehzad Chaudhary. It's funny, he is my brother's friend, who I grew up, looking, like talking to and things like that. It's only recently, I wasn't in touch with him, but only recently I saw he's an amazing creator himself. The amount of stuff he does, it's crazy. Definitely check him out. It's called Lotus Quest, I think is his thing. He's very much into the world of art and artists and creativity. So brilliant question, Shehzad. To build yourself as a creator and then contemplating what to create is definitely, like it's, you have to juggle between the two. You're right, the digital world has created this need for constant creation, and they punish people who don't create as often and as much, which is terrible. But that's the nature of the game right now, that you have to play to even appear in front of people that you want to appear in front of. So I would say you'd have to be very, very, very self-disciplined in terms of the time, the work that you put in, and allocate times for reflecting on your audience and allocating time reflecting on what you want to create. If you're a full-time creator, it's a little bit easier. But if you are like me, where you're not a full-time creator and you're consulting and you're doing other stuff, it's a lot harder. So I think, for musicians, for example, if you've seen the thing that the thing that comes on the top of my head is, with Bohemian Rhapsody, the film with Freddie Mercury and Queen, before they created the song for that album, they went to a different place altogether, away from their life, from the city, focused time on just creating, and then it's just tour. So musicians do it really well because they have like a cycle. They've got albums that they've got like this creative process, then they finalize the album, they ship the album, and then they promote and tour, takes a break, repeat cycle. For other creators, it just really depends on the individual and the audience and the platform that they're using. But I would say you need to have some sort of discipline. Otherwise, it's just going to be too difficult to do both at the same time. I know I'm struggling. All right, the next question is from Deranged Contraptionist. Okay. Why isn't there a shoegaze / dreampop act in Bangladesh yet? Great question, man. I'm sure there is. You know what? Like, we probably haven't come across them, mainly because we live in our own circles, own content bubbles, own echo chambers. This is something I want to talk about down the line. But there probably is one, just will never be on the mainstream. That's a fact. So how do we get fans of shoegaze, dreampop genre to connect to Bangladeshi artists who do that kind of music? I guess that's what we have to solve. So yeah, my answer is that there probably is. It's 2020, and I'm sure every single genre exists in Bangladesh. Just that they are so damn niche that you probably wouldn't even hear about them. So that's my answer.
Tassif, congrats on finishing season 1 of your podcast. Quick question for you. How would you say podcasting is different from other more popular creative endeavors that have taken over Bangladesh, like Instagram content creators and even YouTube videos in the form of vlogging and music videos? I ask because you've been involved in all three and podcasting is still growing in Bangladesh. So just want to get your thoughts on it.
Thanks, man. That was Esanul. He is a brilliant content creator and a marketer. He's, again, one of those guys who just sits in the background, pushes out stuff every now and then. Only complaint I have is that he doesn't push out enough stuff. So, great guy, great friend. Great question as well, man. How is podcasting different than other creative stuff? So, again, it probably falls, to the answer that I've already said. It's more intimate. I feel more connected to the audience. People who have been listening to my podcast, on a more regular basis, they've more or less contacted me directly, and they're like, "Hey, man, I love the stuff. I'm listening to it, waiting for the next one." So I think that level of connection I haven't gotten in any other creative formats. To be fair though, with any medium these days, if you don't post, you don't survive. With podcasting, I feel that you take up a little bit more of their attention because you're just in their head. In Bangladesh though, I feel it's still a very, very long way to go, because if I didn't have the video side of things, I don't think my podcasting would be even getting as many hits as it does. So that's why I had to integrate video. I knew that was going to be the case anyway. But at the same time, it feels like there is a shift happening with so many podcasts coming up. So it tells me that the audience, at least a very small interested group of audience are picking up the culture of podcasting in Bangladesh. So that gives me a bit more freedom to, do stuff. The thing with podcasting, again, is that because it's long form content and most of it is just me talking shit or just me talking with other people, and because it's mostly visual, or at least aimed at being not visual, mostly in an audio format, you tend to get away with a lot of the stuff in terms of editing and mistakes and things like that. So it's a lot less pressure, I think. At least for me, when you're doing a YouTube vlog, you feel a lot more conscious of what you want to put out there, how you look, how you sound, what you want to show. With podcasting, I feel I'm just very, very into it. Like, I'm just natural. This is how I would talk to you, whoever's watching or listening, if you're just sitting right across the table. So I feel that that's the best part about podcasting compared to other creative formats. Great question, my man. Great question. Hope you're doing well in the Big Six. I think that's what it's called. Drake's hometown, 6. How does one cope with the fact that there are people around them, especially their friends, who are creating all this cool and creative content, and they're very supportive towards their friends when they create such content, but also in the back of their mind, they struggle with the fact that they can't produce such creative stuff by themselves, and whatever you create, you feel it's not good enough, or even, like the other cool content, which ends up leading to demotivation. So essentially, what he's trying to say is that you have friends who create cool stuff, people around you who create cool stuff, and you support that stuff, but you feel a bit of a inferiority complex. I think that's what you're trying to get at. The second question: how do you cope with that lack of motivation? And then essentially, how do you keep going back to the zone to create content day after day? I personally find it difficult to find the motivation to create anything, and suddenly I feel doing something. So I think let's break it down into 2 parts. Great question, Fardeen. I think this is something we all go through. I think inferiority complex is something you'll always go through, even if you get better than your friend. There's always going to be someone better than you at what you do. The best way to get out of it is not compare yourself. Literally, like that's the easiest answer, easiest way out. You only compare yourself to yourself, because that's, as cliche as it is, you're not going to, like, it's good to have a certain benchmark that, okay, that's where I want to reach. But if you're on level 1 and your friend's on level 10, there's no way you're going to reach there within just creating one content. You have to keep creating and keep pushing and trialing. But your competition, your level ups is only going to be compared with your previous levels. So I think that's the way to look at it, number 1. So don't beat yourself up if your work isn't as great as your friends. Fine. And the thing is, with any content, 99% of the stuff isn't, it has been done before, in the sense that people have been doing music for hundreds of years. People have been doing art for hundreds of years. So try to learn what others have been doing over decades to see their trajectory, their history, and that's one of the reasons why I've created the podcast, is to tell that story of these creators, so that other creators can maybe get inspired by just one sentence of the podcast. And it's happened to me multiple times. When I listen to someone else talk about their work, I'm like, oh, something clicks, and I get inspired to do that stuff. So I would say don't compare yourself to others straight away. Keep comparing to yourself, and then build towards that benchmark that you have, that I want to be better than my friends or someone else. That's the way I would look at it. The other part, I feel, coping with motivation, it's difficult. I go through that a lot. But how do you bounce back on days you don't feel like it? Honestly, it's a suggestion that I gave to someone else earlier as well, is just create. Literally every day, make a rule that I'm going to create something. You don't have to post it. You don't have to post it anywhere, show it to anyone. But if you keep that self-discipline up of going through days where you create something, even if you don't feel, even if it's something shit, I think it's still, the net positive is always going to be working in favor of you. So I would say just keep creating stuff, man. Doesn't matter who's watching it, who's seeing it. Just keep creating, and eventually you'll feel that you'd have the grasp of, like even if you don't feel like creating on the day, at least your work will slowly keep getting better, or at least when it matters, it'll hit you at the right spot. So I think that's all the questions. It's insane how many questions I got this time. Some brilliant questions, which honestly deserve an episode of its own. I'm sorry if I haven't been able to answer your questions, or if they're too similar to others. I just stuck with whatever I could. So thank you to everyone who's been listening, who's given me the questions. One thing I want to talk about is how similar I saw these guests in certain areas, like when you start interviewing these separate guests and the creative side of things, you start picking up patterns. And one thing I heard, if there's one takeaway that I heard pretty much all of them say, is time management, and how these two words just kept repeating, time management, and prioritizing your work. And I think that's the biggest takeaway I've had personally from my podcast, is listening to these amazing creators, is how you manage your time, how you manage your priority. And of course, there's the technical side. So there's self-discipline, and there's the technical side of, knowing your audience and knowing the tools and knowing Instagram and knowing the stuff. And number 3 is making sure that you are true to yourself, true to your work, because we're all, if you want to play the short game, do whatever you have to do to make that quick buck or get that viral hit. But if you want to be known longer for your work, if you want to be known for your stuff after you've left this earth, I think that's the biggest success in my eyes, where your work outlives you, and your work, your creation benefits someone long after you've passed away. There's the saying that you die twice, once physically and once when someone has said your name for the last time ever. and that just gives me the creeps, but also motivates me to build something that I hope will outlive my existence and will transcend through space, time. And, we'll get Elon Musk to take some of my work to Mars and send a disc. I don't know, I'm just going on a different trajectory. Much like Elon Musk's. So, yeah, I think that's it. That's my biggest takeaway of the podcast, of State of the Creators. Actually, I do have one more episode. It's not State of the Creators. Like, I wouldn't put it on the State of the Creators. I actually sat down with my father and had a one-on-one deep dive into our relationship, into our lives, what makes him who he is today. I asked one question to every single guest as to what their relationship was with their parents, and I decided to take the leap myself and just ask the question as to what instead of asking my question. And I decided to just sit down with my father and really go through some of the burning questions I've had. And in the form of a podcast, I felt this is something that I can revisit, something hopefully the future generations can revisit, and for me to learn and look back years from now. So that's one bonus episode that I'll be releasing. I'm not sure when, but very soon. Season 2 is in the works, so that's a good news. It'll be focused mostly Perth-based, international-based artists. I want to do it face-to-face, which is why it takes a little bit of time to prepare and stuff. I don't want to do online Zoom recordings and call it a podcast with no audio attached. So I'm planning a bit into that kind of stuff. It'll have similar themes, but I think what this will do is create two different worlds for the audience to view, like how creatives in certain regions are doing and how creatives in other regions are doing. And I think I'm in that very unique position to take that decision or to take that journey and explore. So that's it. That's the end of the show, end of the season. Bonus episodes should hit you guys very soon. Season 2, aiming to start releasing in a few months' time. Recording should start over next month. Yeah, that's it. Until next time, create. That's it. I still have this Red Bull to finish, so. Should I start an ASMR channel? Probably not.